And so I remember back in college, my college that I went to was in the middle of nowhere. And so there wasn't really anything to do. And so you had to kind of make your own fun or go on adventures. And so what we ended up doing, me and my group of friends, is every weekend we would go hiking or we would go camping. And then that actually turned into going camping and rappelling. And so out in New Brunswick, we would try to find bluffs or mountains or rock faces, cliffs, and we would get our rappelling gear and we would rappel down the side of those bluffs or cliffs. Now, one of our favorite places, we got a couple of pictures here, is Cape and Rage, and it was on the coast of the Bay of Fundy. And you can imagine huge cliffs, and these cliffs just descend right down to the Bay of Fundy. And so we would tie off on top to like a stable tree, and we would rappel down the face of those cliffs. And I got to tell you, it was absolutely terrifying taking the first step backwards off of a cliff, trusting in your rope to kind of bring you down, and you'd scale down the edge or the side of that cliff face. And when you got to the bottom, especially that location, there wasn't a belayer at the bottom. In fact, there wasn't a way to really get back up because the cliff spanned for kilometers at a time, right? And so you actually had to kind of ascend back up on the rope using press sticks, and you would kind of inch your way up there, and you'd go kind of inch at a time, getting your way to the top. And I'm going to be blunt with you. Like I found it absolutely exhausting to do. It was tiring. It was exhausting, kind of working your way up that cliff, trying to get back up to the top and to get that kind of view over the Bay of Fundy. It was absolutely exhausting. Now, we are on week 4 of Leap of Faith, and we've been trying to answer Blaise Pascal's question and this wager that he put on us. Is it rational to live the Christian life, and is it rational to believe that God exists? And we've actually taken that step further, and we've been asking the question, is it irrational to believe that God doesn't exist? And can you go from unbelief and take a leap over to the belief in God and the creator of the universe? And that takes faith. That leap takes faith. And we've been honing in on a passage that has been our theme verse throughout this series, found in Hebrews 11, verse 1. And here's what it says. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And so here's a breakdown of where we've been to this point. We have said that there's 2 ways to live, either that God does not exist or that he does exist. And you base your entire life, you base your decisions, the way you spend your money, and your time management, if you have kids, how you raise your kids, are based on one of those 2 platforms. Either God exists or he doesn't exist. What we've also said is that we believe in good and evil. We believe in heaven and hell. We believe in God and Satan. And another word for Satan, he is listed as the father of lies. And that's because he's so good at making us believe his lies. And one of the lies that he wants us to believe is that there's more than just 2 options between God exists and he does not. There's all kinds of options. In fact, in each of the categories, and we've laid 3 of them out here, is the atheist, and there's all kinds of different views of atheism. There's the agnostic, and there's all kinds of different paths and views in the agnostic. And then there's the advocate, which we're going to hone in on here today. And Satan would love you to believe that there's all kinds of different viewpoints and belief systems and ways that you can live your life. But what we're finding out is the truth of the matter is that there's only 2. Now, today, as we hone in on the advocate, I realize that there could be many different viewpoints out there who would all claim to be advocates of their faith or their belief system. And so what we're going to do is we're going to explore a few options and what makes Christianity and believing in God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, why is that different than any other belief systems? And what we're consulting is through this book. So what's the difference? It's a great guide to compare the plumb line of the Christian faith versus any other world religions that are out there. And so let me start with this. I think Jesus said things that would inspire some people and would rub others the wrong way, all right? He said some controversial things. And if I'm going to quote him, he said things like this: lose your life to save it. The first will be last. The meek will inherit the earth. Rejoice in persecution. Pray for your enemies. It's better to give than to receive. turn the other cheek. Those are revolutionary teachings of Jesus. But maybe the most outrageous, outlandish claim that Jesus made that people really have problems with is found in John chapter 14, verse 6. And this is what he said: I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That claim bothers people like no other claim that Jesus makes. In fact, some people would label that as narrow-minded. Some people would say that is bigoted. Some people would say that is just like snobbish to believe that Jesus is the only way that you can get to God. And some of you are searching, and you are on a path that has been searching for God. And maybe you are hardened by that kind of statement. And you can't take the leap from unbelief to belief because of statements like that sound so narrow-minded. It sounds so small and bigoted and snobbish. You can't take the leap because of statements like that, because we don't even understand that in our world. I mean, there's so many options for everything, from the cereals that you buy, to the kind of cars that you purchase, to the various forms of how you want to raise your kids, or where you send them to school, or the opportunities that you have for your hobbies. I mean, everything has options, and so why wouldn't there be options for religion, right? And that prevents some of you from taking a leap of faith in your life. And so why is that kind of claim so controversial? I think the reason is that it strikes at the core of three myths that we're going to highlight here today. They're myths about religion, and today we're going to look at what separates the Christian faith from all other world religions. How does that separation occur? And we're going to tackle it through three myths. And so here's the first one here. Here's the first myth that we want to tackle today: that all religions are basically the same. All religions are basically the same. The first myth is that everything is the same when you start stripping them down and get down to their essentials or their core beliefs or values or ethics. They are all essentially the same things. They all lead up to the same place. In fact, if we were going to chart this out, we would kind of have this mountain, and the mountain would have God at the top. And basically what this myth is saying is that no matter what religion that you are a part of, that you advocate on behalf of, all the paths of all the major world religions, they all get to the same God, the same peak on the same mountain. Doesn't matter what paths you take, you automatically get to the same place. And what I would say today is that it is true that there is common ground that is found among all the major world religions, especially when you look at the level of values and statements about morality. I mean, we would share commonalities with a bunch of other advocates of different faiths. But the uniqueness of Christianity is in the person of Jesus. The person of Jesus himself, when you relate that to other religion leaders and the foundation of other world religions, man, other world religion leaders, they say this, like, follow me and I will show you how to find truth. But Jesus says, I am the truth. Other religious leaders say, follow me and I will show you the way to salvation. But Jesus says, I am the way to eternal life. Other religious leaders say, follow me and I will show you how to become more enlightened. But Jesus says, I am the light of the world. You can start to see the differences play out here right from the beginning, right from the get-go, how this counteracts the myth that all world religions are the same. I mean, there's drastic, irreconcilable differences between Christianity and other world religions and belief systems. Because every other world religion and belief system is based on people doing things to ascend the mountain. They are getting their pressing knots set, and they are inching their way up by doing certain things. Whether it's lighting a candle, or dressing a certain way, or going on a pilgrimage to a far-off place, or paying this certain fee, or eating this certain kind of food, or confessing this certain kind of thing, or trying to do unspecified deeds, or having to pray in a certain way, or going through a cycle of reincarnation. Doing all those things are people's attempts to inch their way up the mountain that is difficult to get to the top of. They're attempts to get to God. See, Jesus teaches the opposite of that. The opposite of all of the other religions and belief systems. He says this: nobody could do anything to earn heaven. No one could do anything to get to the top of that mountain, to get to God. No one can do anything. And so you might as well stop trying to earn it. He said that everybody is guilty of wrongdoing. Everyone is guilty of making poor decisions. Everyone is guilty, we would call that sin, of having sin in their life. And we would agree with that. It's consistent with our behavior in our society. There would be no one who's here today who would claim that they are perfect and they haven't made bad decisions or haven't wrongdone someone else. Jesus also says that our wrongdoing, it separates us from God because God is perfect. See, God is at the top of that mountain. He is up at that 50,000-foot view of things. He is way up there, and you can never get close to him because he is perfect and we're not. And so no matter how high you climb on that mountain, you never actually get there. And while other world religious leaders, they can offer like wise sayings and great advice and helpful insight, only Jesus, the perfect Son of God, is qualified to bridge the separation between God who is perfect and us who are not perfect. No other religious leader, no matter what the faith is, none of them even claim to have that kind of perfection in their lives. None of them. And if you could examine Buddha or Muhammad or Confucius. I mean, you could examine them all. You are never going to see perfection in their lives. The only one who was perfect was Jesus. In fact, theologian R.C. Sproul, he puts it this way: Moses could meditate on the law. Muhammad could brandish a sword. Buddha could give personal counsel. Confucius could offer wise saying, but none of these men was qualified to offer atonement for the sins of the world. Jesus alone was qualified. And we understand justice. Everyone wants justice. But where does justice come in for all of the wrongdoing and all of the sin? It's not by climbing the mountain. And it's not the same as other world religions, which leads us to myth number 2. Christianity is simply one philosophy among many philosophies. And in Canada, we love that. I mean, we love that in our society, right? It says that even though Christianity might be different, it's just one philosophy among many philosophy. It's one religion claiming truth among many religions claiming truth. And here's what we like to do in Canada. We like to say, your truth is yours, and that's fine, but my truth is mine. And so you do your thing, I will do mine thing. We won't judge each other. Everything is fine, and you believe your truth, and what's truth for you is not truth for me. That's kind of how we live in our society. The difference maker is that Jesus actually claims to be truth. Jesus does. And he backs up his claim with credentials. If I were to highlight a few of those for you today, they would be, some of these credentials would be that he lived a perfect life. No one argued with that, by the way. Even historians who aren't Christians, they wouldn't argue with that. By living out the attributes of God in his life, by living out what the Old Testament was saying, by living that stuff out, by fulfilling dozens of prophecies that were written in the Bible hundreds of years before he came into the world. Jesus fulfilled these prophecies that were written, right? He performed miracles, not in the darkness, not by sleight of hand, but in broad daylight in front of countless skeptics. And he does these miracles, and people witness it, people see it, and it's recorded as actual events in history. He demonstrates that he can control nature by the calming of storms and waters and wind and wave, by walking on water. He's demonstrated that he can control sickness by healing people who are sick, people who are blind, people who couldn't walk. He demonstrates that he can control death by bringing Lazarus, who was dead for 4 days in a damp, dark, stinky tomb, rotting away. He brings this guy back to life. And maybe the best claim of all in his credential list is that Jesus, he actually fulfills his own prediction that he dies on a cross and he's resurrected 3 days later. He dies and he comes back to life, and 500 people witness that event. 500 people. It's a non-negotiable. You can't argue with witness accounts, right? 500 people see that take place. And because of that event, and because of those 500 people, a revolution, a movement takes place that is greater than any other revelation or movement that the world has ever seen. See, Christianity is not just a philosophy. It's a reality. Jesus didn't just claim that he's the one and only Son of God. He actually validated his claims by his credentials, by what he did and how those things were recorded in history. And no one else has that kind of evidence beside their name to be God. Which leads us to myth number 3. Christians are narrow-minded to think that Jesus is the only way to heaven. They're narrow-minded. And I kind of get that. Like, I kind of get that view that someone would have a problem with Christians kind of claiming that, hey, we know the truth, and we're going to pick it outside of whatever it is that we believe is not the truth, and we are going to claim that as our own, and you guys are idiots if you don't believe what we believe. I mean, that is narrow-minded. I would totally get that. But I think the way that Christians would perceive that same claim is that someone has to pay the penalty. Justice has to be served for the wrongdoing or the problems of the world. And the one who paid the price is Jesus. And we know that to be truth. That's where we would stake our claim on. And if I was gonna kind of summarize this or put this into an illustration, I would do it like this. Some of you who have had kids, or some of you who have been or seen a child with jaundice, who's born, they're jaundice. That means their skin is yellow. The whites of their eyes are yellow. And it is a liver problem, a disorder that is causing their skin to kind of look that way. And imagine the doctor, he tells you that, you know what, your child has a potentially devastating disease that if not treated, they could actually die from. But there's a cure for it. See, the simple cure to jaundice, this devastating terminal disease that they have, is simply by putting them under the light. That's it. But you, as the parents of this child, you would imagine this. You actually fought back the doctor and said, well, there's got to be other ways to cure this child. What if we take our child and we dip them in bleach? We put them down, we put them in a vat of bleach, and we scrub their skin until that yellow comes right out of them, right? What if is that possible? I mean, there's got to be other ways. And the doctor's like, well, I'm telling you, it's a very simple thing to do. All you got to do is just put them in the light. You just got to put your baby in the light. And if they're there long enough, it's going to disappear. That's the cure for it. And you're like, well, what if we just keep our baby long enough? I mean, won't it just like correct itself? Won't it just like go away over time? Like, it doesn't really have to be dealt with right now, right? Because over time, that thing will probably just cure itself. And he says, no, all you got to do is just put your baby under the light. The cure is there. And you say, well, that sounds a little bit too easy, Doc. I mean, that's all you got to do, really? Like, our baby might die if we don't take care of this, but all we got to do is put them under the light. That doesn't really make sense. And the doctor's like, listen, Look at the credentials on my wall. I am a doctor. I've gone to school. I've actually rescued many, 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 many babies that have had the same problem over and over and over again. I've studied in medical school, and what I've learned is that you can treat babies by just putting them in the light, all right? That's all you got to do. Now, would we say that if the parents chose to follow through with the doctor's cure of jaundice, would we call that narrow-minded? No. Because based on the doctor's credentials, experience, and evidence, we would say that is a rational choice to let the doctor cure them. Let me put it this way. Every person in our world has a terminal disease. It's not called jaundice. It's not called cancer. What it's called is sin. And the reason those who follow Jesus, who advocate on behalf of Jesus, the reason why they cling to him so closely and try to follow his every move is because they know that the doctor has the only cure. We could try to scrub ourselves away. We could try our best with good deeds, but it will not work. We can sincerely think that there are other paths and other ways to deal with the stain that is on our lives. But the doctor's like, look, the cure is actually pretty easy. All you have to do is expose yourself to the light. See, John 1, verse 1 reads like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and God was with the Word. And the Word is representing Jesus here, you realize. He was with God in the beginning, it says. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Verse 9, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. And just because we know the cure, and the cure is Jesus, it doesn't mean that everybody will recognize it. It doesn't mean that everyone will come to that same conclusion. It doesn't mean that everyone, even with the evidence and the credentials and what has taken place, doesn't mean that they're going to go along with it. You see, the difference maker here is that God never, ever asked anybody to climb any kind of mountain. He never did. He realized that there was a distant issue between where he was and where we find ourselves. And he said, I'm going to go down there. And he descends the mountain himself in the form of Jesus. And there's no need to ascend up that rope like we had to. Because in the worst moment, Jesus puts you on his back. And he carries you up to his dad, to his Father. And those of you who haven't made that choice and haven't exposed yourself to the light, maybe that's what you need to do here today. But maybe you have. And maybe you do advocate on the behalf of Jesus, but you have a problem or an issue because you associate on a daily basis with people in your family or your workplace or your friends who advocate on behalf of other world religions. And what I'd like to say to you is let's take a look at how Jesus responded to other world religions, to people who advocated on behalf of other ways to live, right? Here's how we're called to interact with them. Let's take a look at what Jesus did, the things that he did do. Jesus did heal the sick. People who were sick, he helped them be not sick anymore. He delivered demonically oppressed. people who struggled in their sin and who were victims and bound in their sin. He told people to tell others about what God had done in their lives. He told them, tell that story. Go shout it from the rooftops. Tell people what God has done in your life. He praised people for their great faith and the leaps that they've taken. He praised people as examples of what God wants. And he announced that there's an opportunity. If you expose yourself to the light and you follow God's word, there is a place for you in heaven where I'm going to be waiting for you. But here's what Jesus did not do in the face of other religions. See, the only time that he was, only when he's asked does Jesus ever reveal himself as a Messiah and as a king. See, what he doesn't do is follow his own Jewish culture's harmful ways. He knows that there's a problem in the Jewish religion, in that culture. He's not going to follow the customs exactly how they're laid out. He does not condemn or rebuke people outwardly as he's walking down the road, as he's out in his workplace, as he's sitting at a restaurant. I mean, he's not doing that. He doesn't warn people that they're going to hell out of nowhere. He doesn't argue and debate with people about theology or quoting the scriptures or knowing the gospel or ask people to change things about themselves. That's not what he does. See, what he does is he dismisses religion in the first place. But listen, he never dismisses the person. And there are all kinds of people who disagree with what we advocate for. But just because we disagree, we never dismiss. Jesus came to institute a church. Jesus came to institute a revolution, but he never came to institute a religion. And he's asking you, this changed everything. Will you join me in that revolution? Will you join me in that movement? Will you come and get the cure and join and understand what so many people advocate on behalf of? He's never asking you to join a religion. He's asking you, what do you believe? What are you willing to wager your belief on? And will you take the leap from unbelief to belief? Let's pray. God, we just thank you for sending your son in that separation gap between us and you, God. That your son came down, that he lived a sinless life, that he fulfilled prophecies, that he healed the sick, that he performed miracles, that he lived this thing out, and that he died for the payment of our wrongdoings, and that he resurrected for 500 witnesses. And because of that point, in that moment on, our world was never the same. It changed everything. Father, help us in our unbelief and help us to love others the way that you do. Go with us, we pray, in the name of Jesus.